Welcome to everybody who's on the line, everyone who's watching. I'm Sean Leslie from Crelate, and welcome to our roundtable discussion on integrated candidate communications strategy. As you saw in the marketing materials, there are so many different ways to communicate with candidates these days, and it's important to time each channel, your message for each channel appropriately, and make sure you're utilizing the right channel at the right moment. And so we have just a panel of experts here that I wanted to introduce. And Pache, if you wanted to introduce yourself, we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pache Gray, the HR manager at Crelate. I've been with Crelate for a little over a year and manage the talent acquisition and people function. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. Really excited to talk about candidate communication with all of you.
Thanks, Pache. Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Brian. I am one of the co-founders of Rectext, which is text message communication software for recruiters. My background is I've been in the recruiting industry since the mid-2000s. I've spent about 10 years of my career on the agency staffing side of recruiting and about 6 years of my career on the HR internal corporate side of recruiting. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. Big fan of Crelate, love this software, and we've been partnering with Crelate for quite some time now, so it's really great to be here. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Brian, and right back at you. We love Rectext. Chris, take it away.
Yeah, so my name is Chris Hesson. I'm one of the product consultants with Crelate. Like Brian, I come out of the recruiting industry as well, more on the agency side. I worked the desk for quite a while, did retainers, staffing, contingency, ran the gambit, and then I spent the last 6 years with MRI Network's corporate team as a tech and ops consultant. So I would work with a variety of offices, hundreds all over the globe, on understanding their internal operations and tech stack and helping them develop processes around what their team actually does and how they incorporate technology into their recruiting day-to-day practices.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again, all of you, for joining. I really appreciate it. Nice to have this wealth of knowledge here. And I wanted to kick us off. We were going to talk about, Chris, I think you were going to talk about using different communication channels at different points in the recruiting flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions I think everyone always asks is, so LinkedIn, Facebook, text, email, call, what is the best surefire 100% guaranteed way to get a hold of somebody? And the answer is yes. That's the answer. It is every single one. And part of this is because as humans, we all respond differently to different tools. I personally don't have Facebook Messenger installed on my phone. If you send me a Facebook message, I will never, ever see it. I live in my email. As a recruiter, you live in LinkedIn. Some people live and die by text. Some people actually pick up the phone. I know it's rare, but there are some people who do it. And at the end of the day, at an individual level, because I do not know the best way to communicate with Sean, the only option is for me to do all of them over and over again until I find out which one works. And I think from a cold perspective, having a multi-channel strategy is huge, especially when it comes to that initial contact. Now, what I think is even more important of that initial contact is having a specific goal in mind. Now, if you are working on a search and you're trying to get a hold of a candidate, if you leave a voicemail for a candidate or send them a LinkedIn message, what is the thing you are trying to accomplish? What is that action you want them to take? Now, it would be nice to say, well, I want them to say yes and accept the job. But that's not what the next step, that might be the end result. That's where I'm trying to move this process to. But my initial reach out, the action I want them to take is to call me back, to email me back. So if we're taking that multi-channel approach, think of what your actual goal is in mind and make sure your messaging aligns with what it is you're trying to accomplish. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Danny Cahill. I shamelessly stole that little promo I'm saying from him. Danny, kudos to you, fantastic mind and thought leader in the recruiting industry. But if you look at your different channels, calling is always going to be for persuasion. Your communication over the phone, this is where you can use the greatest tool you have, which is your voice, your mind, and your intellect to try to understand where somebody is coming from, what they're trying to accomplish, and help assess them as well as sell to them. That has to be done over the phone. I don't know how many people have made a major life decision and jumped into one of the most stressful things anybody can go through, which is changing a job, because man, that email is so well written. Like really, you have to have that human element to it. So anytime that there is an element of persuasion, of selling or assessment, you have to get on the phone and do it. Email, awesome tool, but there's some things it's good for and others not. Assessing people, not as great. So easy to misconstrue something written over text when you can't hear their inflection, what they're saying. So I like to look at emails for information. So if I'm looking to have follow-up details, I'm looking to give a little more depth to some of the items I may have talked about in a actual conversation, email is a fantastic tool. And then texting, I love texting, this idea of motion. Texting helps move the process along. Now, I personally, if I get a text from an unknown number, my iPhone is set up to automatically not even show it to me, so I won't even get it. However, somebody that I've worked with before and I've talked to, a text from them can help give that little reminder, put that drop in the bucket. So I love the idea of texting to move the process forward. For example, maybe a reminder to them that you had called, especially if it's someone you've worked with before. Reaching out and sending a text to that hiring manager saying, hey, were you able to find a time to interview the candidate this week? So what are the items that will move your process along forward? You don't want to have to wait for a phone call back. You don't have to wait for an email. You're not trying to persuade. You're not trying to gather or receive information. You're just trying to move the process, scheduling something, confirming something. Text is such a powerful tool to keep it quick and keep it personal as you go forward. So I love this idea of if you have to persuade, get on the phone and call them. If you need to send info, jump on email. And if you're moving the process, text should be the first go-to.
Love it. Anything you wanted to add, Brian or Pache? Some examples of, Chris, you talked about some examples of scheduling initial phone calls, that kind of thing. And I think that's great, a great way to talk about how the different channels are useful.
Yeah, I can just build a little bit on, what Chris was saying. And I mean, he talked about the various methods and how you should use those. I think that a consideration, not to be overlooked is really, letting the candidate be in the driver's seat, right? So, you may determine the different methods that you want to reach out to the candidate, but, for me, it's really allowing them to choose how they wanted to be communicated with. And, I think something as simple as, just asking them right during the process, hey, for scheduling interviews, I typically send out emails, is that, would that work for you, right? And which, if I were to text you, like, what would be, would you prefer I follow up with you via text or whatnot? I think Brian had actually sent out a poll on LinkedIn recently and asking whether, asking whether candidates prefer to, be left a voicemail or a text message, right? And an overwhelming majority said they would rather get a text message. But I mean, there's still a small percentage of folks that would rather get that voicemail. So I think it's important. It's an important data point to capture. And so if you don't get that during the initial intake process, like during the initial call, make sure you capture it. I think that it really helps with, getting the candidate response, but more often than not is really getting that timely response. And so, kind of think about, my own experience, right? Before I've been with Crelate for about a year now, and the 2 to 3 months before, I was in the job market, and, it's looking for a job is, it's a job, it can be a very exhausting, mentally draining process. And so I kind of recall a lot of the, positive experiences that I had, and a lot of times it's not, like how, great the opportunity was, or that it was the highest paying gig. It was really the connection with the recruiter, right? How well were they at recruiting, and informing me of the entire process, right? I would be a lot more deliberate about, responding to them right away, or at least faster than other recruiters, because, I felt a connection to that opportunity. So I bring really a lot of those positive and really even just also the negative experiences into kind of how I approach my recruiting on a day-to-day basis. And so again, that candidate experience is kind of what we draw a lot of this back to. And so when you kind of put the candidate in the driver's seat, I think that it kind of makes that process a little bit more streamlined. This is it is a buyer's market, right? And so you don't really want to leave anything to chance.
Yeah. Yeah, great points, and especially establishing those preferences with your candidates. Brian, you had some, aside from these really great polls you got on LinkedIn, and thank you for sharing those. You had some interesting information about, you know, everyone likes to lump millennials into one group, but as a group, they tend to be more responsive to texts and less so to emails, and you had some interesting information on that.
Yeah, I do. And you know, like if you could see my head, it was nodding the entire time that Chris and Pache were talking. And you know, me being one of the, you know, a co-founder of a text messaging software, I'm not a maximalist as it relates to text messaging. I completely agree with what Chris was saying. Call for persuasion, email for info, and text for emotion. I think that's really powerful. And texting is just one part of the process, and so what I see some recruiters, major mistake recruiters do is they just use one communication platform or one stream, and they rely on it heavily, and so you're not going to get the full effect. So it's one of the sort of the holy grail of you know, communication for staffing agencies and internal teams is getting that balance right and knowing when to use each stream at the right time. So as it relates to texting, I mean, that's an area of specialization, and it's a world that I'm deeply in. There, you know, you could Google text messaging stats. So these are all pretty standard, industry standard, common statistics, but they're all powerful. And I think a lot of us can sort of think about, okay, well, when was the last time I got a text? Or more specifically, when was the last time I got a text that I did not read? And for me, I think it's never. Like, I feel like every time I get a text message, I get that little notification on my phone. It's a text message I read. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to respond to that, right? So we have to break this up a little bit and go, yes, just because you're texting, you're going to get a very high read rate. In fact, 98% of texts are read, apparently, and I believe it. I probably think for me, it's 100% of text, but it doesn't mean that the response rate is going to be there. You know, you could have 100% of your text read, but you have, you know, 0% response rate. That's not effective. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at these sorts of statistics. But as it relates to millennials and you know, Gen Z or Gen Z, as we say here in Canada, the longer time goes on, the larger proportion of the labor market they will make up. And if you know any Gen Zs or Gen Zs, they love to text first. And it's not just explicitly that generation, but it's almost everyone now. So just keep that in mind, really. And like what Pache was saying, like, establish expectations with your candidate and really identify what works best for them. But as a generic sort of broad brush stroke, I would say text messaging today works for anybody. And you know, why text messaging or SMS over WhatsApp or other like Facebook Messenger, like Chris was mentioning? It's because text, the text app is a universal app on everybody's phone. So you can use WhatsApp. I know recruiters that use WhatsApp really well. It is the read receipt, which is really powerful. However, not everyone has WhatsApp on their phone, you know, so you could be sending WhatsApp messages and the candidate's not receiving them. At least, you know, with SMS text, everyone is going to receive that because that's a standard default application that's on every iPhone, every Android, etc. So that's why SMS texting is sort of like a universal short message platform. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I'm interested to see. I've forgotten what the next slide is, but there you go. And Brian, you had mentioned that texting is useful not just for the actual recruiting process, but communicating with clients too.
Yeah, interesting one. The first time I ever texted for recruiting was actually with a CTO, which felt really strange at the time. But my recruiting manager, she suggested, I was having issues. I said, I cannot get feedback from the CTO. I need to. I think I was following up on candidate resume or something, and this is actually when I was on the internal side. And she said, I'll just text him, you know, and this is the CTO of a multi-billion-dollar organization. And I thought, wow, you know, I only text my friends and family. So it felt strange, but I took her advice and I sent text to the CTO and I got a response. And he was in a meeting, a board meeting or something important. But it was a really quick message, and it was like, hey, do you want to meet this candidate? Yes, looks great. Thanks for checking in. I was like, wow, this is powerful. And this was about 5 years ago. And so, as time's gone on, I think we can all sort of agree that text messaging has become a bigger part of our lives outside of the friends and family realm. When I took my bike in to get a service the other day, and I got a text message just saying it was ready to be picked up, and it's business texting. So there's this whole movement of business texting, and recruitment falls into that category of using text messaging for business purposes. And so, as this slide relates to, this was done last year in 2020. I'm sure there's an updated study out there now, and I would say that these figures have actually increased. So, and I think, I would hope that near 100% of staffing firms agree that texting improves candidate and client experience. But the caveat on that is it's got to be the right message at the right time to the right person. You can send spam, you can send an unprofessional message. You can do more damage if you're not doing it properly. So as long as you're using texting in the right way, it will improve candidate and client experience. And already the high majority of staffing firms are using it. And so one of the big takeaways that I saw when I read this statistic, I said, okay, so if I'm an agency recruiter or an internal recruiter, it's competitive, internal or agency today. If I'm not using texting, then my competition are probably using texting, and so they are probably at an advantage over me in the sort of the war for talent.
And you kind of queued up our next section, but I just wanted to say that I think the proof is in the pudding and how effective text messaging is, that you managed to contact that CTO in the middle of a board meeting and he still responded, which I think is illustrative of that point. Right, so you, Brian, kind of hinted at some of the do's and don'ts of these kinds of communications, and if any of you wanted to speak to, horror stories about texting candidates or any kind of communication with candidates and these best practices, that would be excellent, because I know that you have some good stories that we already discussed.
So if I'll jump in from a multi-channel approach, combine your channels together. So if I have to email, call, LinkedIn, need to do all of them, reinforce them. So if I leave Brian a voicemail, shoot a quick email to follow up and say, hey, Brian, just left you a message. Sorry, I missed you. Here's my number. Let's chat. Shoot a quick text to follow up an email. Hey, not sure if you will check your inbox, wanted to get in front of you. Whatever it is, combine your channels together, because different people respond and pay attention to different ones. And I'm more likely, if I get a text from an unknown number that references the email they just sent me or the phone call and voicemail they left me before, now I'm going to look and say, well, hey, when did they call me? Let me go check that voicemail message. Let me go read that email. You're more likely to be able to increase the readability and people's likelihood to pay attention and read it. So text, again, that concept of texting for motion, when you want the candidate to do something, text is such a powerful tool. But like Brian mentioned, I think it's a double-edged sword, because you do have such line of sight and you do have such visibility. A bad text can do a whole ton of harm. Don't you dare copy and paste a job description in a text. Like, if the candidate is going to get carpal tunnel trying to scroll through, 100 lines, and I have seen people do it, like as silly as they do. Don't do that. Make sure you're quick, you're to the point, you're direct, but leverage that channel. I mean, it's such a powerful tool because you have direct access to people.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, this
absolutely.
I attended a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and this is an organization that has a lot of data as results to text messaging, and they've done a lot of analysis, and what they found was shorter messages. And so we're talking shorter, when we say short messages, again, I'm talking texting right now, but we're talking like 140 characters or less. Like if you use Twitter, you use the character counter. We're talking about a short message. A short message gets, reading it right now, 5 times the response rate of a longer message. So when you're creating, you can use texting for mass messaging, where you can send more than one text message one text message to more than one candidate at a time. Through our software, you can do that. But you want to keep, even so, you still want to keep those messages really short, and you'll see a much higher response rate. So when Chris did copy and paste the job description, I laughed because people actually do that. They go, okay, well, we're going to use texting, so texting has a higher response rate and a higher read rate, so I'll just copy and paste my emails and put them into text and problem solve, right? But actually wrong.
Yeah.
Short, use the text like Chris said. You can say, hey, I've just sent you a really important email. Please check that you've received it. Let me know. You know, a real short message to follow up and to support an email. Or like Chris said, leave a message with somebody. You get you try to call a candidate, it's a missed call. Send them a quick text. Hey, Brian from staffing agency XYZ, just left you a message. It'd be great to chat. Something really short and punchy is all you need.
Love it. And Pache, I know that you did my entire, Pache, you hired me or recruited me, and I think we did our entire interview process via text. Just kidding. That was an example of what not to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I believe we did utilize all channels during your recruiting process, right? I mean, the text didn't really start coming in until I think you got to the interview loop, where we did follow-ups that way, or kind of like, hey, Sean, I sent you an email with, your offer letter details, I sent that to you via text, right? So, I mean, there's definitely, ways to utilize all the channels to kind of move a candidate through the entire process from start to finish.
Yep. Did you get my email? I remember those. But I'm here, so you did great, and I couldn't have done too badly.
Yeah.
And so we talked a little bit about texting, but something that RecText does really well and integrates with Crelate, so hopefully Crelate does well too, is that, or excuse me, I know that Crelate does well too, is texting from within our software. And ideally, I think you probably don't want to text candidates from your phone if you can help it. And so this software, like RecText, Brian, if you can speak to that a little bit about how it integrates and why it's better to text from within your dashboard, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an area of recruiting that is developing. Like I mentioned earlier, it was only a few years ago that we started texting with candidates, and candidates started to become comfortable with it, and now candidates prefer it. A lot of the younger generation of candidates especially. So as things have evolved, and now with the recruiting world, so has the software, right? And so originally the only choice recruiters had to text with candidates, and I was one of them, was using one of these, right, like a cell phone. And everyone's got one, which is great. And so the de facto thought for recruiters is, oh, if I'm texting my candidates, then I'll just use my cell phone, right? And so, yeah, that will get you so far. But if you're serious about recruiting and you want to really enjoy the benefits of the SMS communication platform, the last thing, ironically, you want to be using is your personal cell phone. And there are many reasons for that. And just to list off a couple, I mean, the first thing is it's unsafe. So the reason why RecText came to be, like the whole reason why I started RecText in the first place is I had a female recruiter come to me. I was leading a team of tech recruiters a couple of years ago, and she came to me and said, Brian, I've been receiving late night text messages from a candidate, which has made me feel uncomfortable. They're unsolicited. And so she said, I'm going to stop texting candidates. And at that time, we were all using our personal phones, which I thought was the right thing to do. And so it really opened up my eyes, and I thought, wow, you know what? I looked around the bullpen and I saw everyone texting, and I thought, okay, this is working, but everyone's putting their personal number out into the public, and candidates are strangers. Yeah. Until you build a relationship with them, they are strangers. So, I thought, well, okay, as a recruitment leader, I have a responsibility for the safety of my staff. And so that's what started everything. I thought there's got to be a better way. And the more research I did, I thought, you know what, this is actually bigger than just a safety thing. It's compliance. You need to have opt-out. It's when I thought about it, it's really unproductive to manually put candidate information into your phone and unlock your phone and be distracted by notifications for Facebook, etc. And then you finally get around to texting, and then so there's the efficiency part of thing. And then as a recruiting leader, I thought, you know what, all of our emails have been tracked in our ATS. What about our text messages? They're in the pockets of the recruiting team, and what happens if my a recruiter leaves or goes on vacation or like goes to our competition? Where's that track record of communication IP like data, which is really important for me. As a recruitment leader, I wanted to make sure that all that data was centralized in the ATS so we could retrieve it later on. So this is what started the whole RecTech story. And so, yeah, in terms of the biggest don't, in my opinion, when texting with candidates is do not use your personal phone. It's not compliant, it's unproductive, it's unsafe, it's not integrated with your CRM, and it's inefficient. So don't do that. And then so a couple of other points here, and again, this is it's common sense in terms of like think about text messaging. Like just don't spam your candidates. Don't send them irrelevant or untimely messages at mass. And that's how we're really lucky in the recruitment industry. Text messaging is still a really great tool for us. It's a great medium we still get really good response rates. So as a community, let's not ruin that. Let's not go the email way where now 50% of all emails are spam. We're getting into sort of dangerous territory, and a mistake that recruiters use when using software is they go, oh, I'm just going to like select all and then send a mass message to all my candidates. And then you get all these candidates respond with opting out saying stop, and so then you've burnt that relationship. So be careful with text messaging software.
Totally. Well, we have a couple questions as we approach the hour mark. But before that, Brian, you made me very self-conscious. I just want to say to everyone on the call that I am trying desperately not to spam you with marketing email. But let's see what we have for questions here. We have one. How do you send text messages when you don't have the candidate's phone number? What would you suggest there?
Sorry.
So this is more of a sourcing question, it sounds like.
I beg your pardon?
So this sounds like it's more of a sourcing question.
Yes.
My personal take is if I have had zero interaction and I have made zero other types of attempts, I will not lead with a text message. I want to try to reach out on LinkedIn first, reach out over email first. I want to try another form of communication just because I think texting is one of the last bastions of the personal. My first email account was Juno, if anyone's that old that remembers that platform. And I remember how excited I was in like middle school to get my first email account. Nobody's excited to get email accounts anymore because that email felt very personal. You're only receiving messages from people you know. It was so cool. Texting still has this bastion of it is still a very personal thing. I think to Brian's point on kind of the security behind it, you are a stranger to the candidate to take the other end of the equation. I would not lead with a cold text. Now, there are ways and tools you can leverage. One of the biggest things I would recommend is if you use any of the job boards, Monster, Career Builder, those, don't use any sort of recent time filter. If I can find Pache's resume from 7 years ago, odds are it's going to be the same number. I haven't changed my cell phone number since I was like 17. Like we have the same number and we will have that for the rest of our lives. So if you want to find a number, find an old resume on an old job board. That's a great way to do it. But I would not initiate a relationship based on text only.
Love it. Let's see. Next question. Lara, so apologies if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, wanted to know, what do you think about using Google Voice for texting?
That was my first tool that I used. I worked for a staffing firm. We did per diem for healthcare. And I actually leveraged Google Voice quite a bit. So, I mean, I think it's definitely an option there. The big thing is, where does that data live and how? So if you're a business owner, who owns that data? Whose account is it? Who can take that with them? When I managed a team, I wanted to have one central repository for all that information. I think as an option though, I personally have used it in the past, and especially with the Chrome extension at the top, pretty handy. And you can do it from your phone as well, but through that number in addition to a browser plugin.
Nice.
Yeah, my work number is, I can also receive texts, and generally the way I utilize it is for interviews, and it's kind of like you run into technical issues, call or text me, this number. And so, but yeah, as much as you can, you try to want to have all the communications recorded in your ATS.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit more to that. So, specialized software like ours, you can leverage like efficiencies, for example, message templates, which you can't do with Google Voice, which is super helpful. And then, yeah, just like Google Voice is not designed for recruiting. So there's a whole workflow around, where you need to be online to use Google Voice. And so maybe it solves some of those problems. It's better than using your phone for that reason. It's a little bit faster to use, but it still doesn't solve a lot. You still don't have, like, opting out is you need to be compliant. If you're using text messaging for business reasons, you need to have a way for candidates to be able to opt out. And as far as I'm aware, you can't do that through Google Voice. So software like RecText has automated opting out. The first message that you send to a candidate has a little message at the end of it saying, hey, respond with stop, unsubscribe, or cancel. If that candidate does that, then our software will automatically opt that candidate out. So being compliant with TCPA regulations is really important, and Google Voice and personal cell phones, don't qualify for that.
Right on. Sorry, I'm muddling with Windows here. Okay, next question. I lost 2 candidates recently using 2 platforms, calling and LinkedIn/emailing. Would text be a majority of the reason for me not closing these candidates? So I think the question is, because this person did not use text, do you think that impacted that recruitment?
I think on an individual basis, that's really hard to tell. I think you need to look at broader, kind of your statistical elements. On average is larger as opposed to onesie twosie. Can texting help bring in, people? If you look back at an individual case, my general thought is if you were going to lose somebody, you're probably going to lose them no matter what. It's just when in the process that is revealed. For me, I always made the joke that no is my second favorite answer. I just want to have that answer sooner than later. So I would much rather get a no right up front than get a no at an offer, because that's the worst. So could text help in an individual case? I wouldn't go that far. I think if you look on averages, you look across the life cycle of your desk, it can absolutely increase your ability to build and further that relationship.
Nice. Funny question here. As an internal recruiter in my early 50s who recruits engineers often aged 25 to 40, mostly male, I have felt that texting is intrusive or too personal, even for a candidate whom I've already spoken to by phone. Am I a dinosaur? That's from Kristen. Kristen, you are not a dinosaur. And then I'll let one of these guys take over from there.
Maybe I can speak to that because it's a text messaging question.
Mm-hmm.
I would say no. I would say, it may feel uncomfortable. I remember for me, it did the first time I told the story about texting the CTO. I thought I was way out of my, my respectful grounds there, but it turned out to be really fine. You can ask your candidates, like what Pache was saying at the start, to set that expectation. So you can say, hey, is it cool if I send you text messages? And if they say, yeah, then you're fine. If they say, no, I hate texting for whatever reason, which in my opinion will be quite unlikely, I've never seen it, then just don't text them. So maybe take that route and just set expectations up front and just check in with that candidate what they prefer you do, and then go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Ask. Like, when in doubt, just ask. And if someone is uncomfortable receiving a text, they'll tell you. And if they're okay with it, you've now just built that and laid that foundation to build a better relationship. Never hesitate to just be upfront and ask somebody. That's half your job as a recruiter, is to ask people questions. That's a great one to ask them. Do you mind if I text you?
Yeah. Right on. Last question. As a recruiter, I would like to use my personal work cell phone for text, because if I switch jobs, I will still have my contacts and they will have mine. What do you think about that?
Chris?
If you're gonna go that direction, that might be a good instance for, Google Voice. As someone who led a team, if I was running the business, I would want the ownership of all of that information. You're building the relationships, totally get you want to have that as well, or that ownership. I think from a safety standpoint, Google Voice might be a good option, just because you can run it, on that standpoint. But whatever it is, just make sure you are in bounds and in line with whatever contracts and agreements you have. You don't want to get caught for taking data or things with you. But keep the security thing in mind, because I think that is legitimate. You know, having a cell phone number out there's a lot of stuff people can do with it. And that you might be on the receiving end of unwanted text messages as well. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I wanted to thank you all again for taking the time today. I think we have answered all of our questions. If people are interested in seeing RecText integrate with Crelate or how some of this functionality works, please feel free to reach out to our customer success team and our product experts, and they can set you up with a quick demo. I had a question about, will we be sending out this information after the webinar as far as the statistics and that kind of stuff? Yes, I will be sending an email to everyone on the call with the slide deck and a recording of this webinar. I think if unless anyone has anything they want to add, I think that's about it.
I'll add one more thing, Sean. So we partnered with Crelate earlier this year, and we put together a guide for text recruiting, and it's really educational. So it just talks about those data points, how to use texting, when to use it, when not to use it, do's and don'ts, all that sort of stuff. So that's a great resource. It's completely free, and I'm sure that can be received through the Crelate website as well.
Yes, thank you for reminding me to do my job. And on that note, I just want to again say thank you to everyone who joined the webinar, and we're going to call it good now. I hope you all have a great Tuesday. Please feel free to reach out should you need.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.